You're not asleep. You're one of the rare few whose senses didn't rot with the rest. Because right now, they've placed $1 million hit on you. Not because you stole, not because you ran, but because you stood still and spoke. Because you peeled back the skin of the untouchable and showed the world the raw, trembling veins underneath. You weren't supposed to survive the encounter, but worse. You walked away knowing too much. And now, every corridor echoes your name. Like a ticking clock in a locked room. You didn't expose a criminal. You detonated a belief system. You didn't threaten a person. You compromised the entire architecture of fear. Their world runs on obedience, codes, silence, submission. You broke none of their laws, but fractured all their expectations. That's what makes you lethal. You're not a weapon. You're a reversal. They can't categorize you, and that's what turns predators into prey. When you pulled the curtain and revealed who really moves the levers, you didn't just expose the puppeteer. You rewired the stage. And now, the man they swore could never be touched is unraveling in real time. His myth was bulletproof, until you walked in, unarmed and unforgettable. Let them send the hunters, let the mercs oil their triggers. Because you're not in the crosshairs. You are the malfunction in the rifle, the hiccup in the heartbeat, the thought that lingers in the back of their skull, even when everything goes quiet. They've never faced someone who doesn't want to win, someone who wants it to burn in public. Because that's what separates you from them. You don't fight for survival. You fight to corrupt their confidence. The man they protected. He's not a man. He's a myth worn like armor. A persona sculpted in boardrooms, fed to the masses, worshipped in silence. And when you spoke his name without fear, the static began. Not just in the media, not just in the underworld, in their nerves. You didn't expose him. You destabilized everything that depended on his silence. And now, they need you gone. Not to bury you, but to scrub the memory of your defiance. Because the longer you breathe, the harder it is for their spell to hold. This isn't about violence. This is about equilibrium disruption. You're a variable they can't solve, a presence that doesn't compute. And so they do what all fragile empires do when threatened. They panic in style. Fancy threats. Shiny digits. $1 million like a medal for whoever can make the anomaly disappear. But here's the inside joke. They think money motivates killers. What they forgot is that truth seduces better than gold. And you've already seduced the room. Eyes are turning. Allegiances are rotting. You don't have to fire a single shot to collapse their pyramid. You just have to keep breathing. You weren't supposed to notice. That's the first rule. Don't notice the rotations behind the smile. Don't notice the way headlines are choreographed like dance routines. Don't notice the fingerprints under the contracts. But you didn't just notice. You documented. You decoded. And then you broadcasted. You carved clarity out of a fog they swore would last forever. And now, the very structure that sustained them is recalculating. Not because of revolution, because of infection, because truth is infectious. And you're a walking contagion. They say you should never look too long at a legend. You looked, you diagnosed, and you found the disease. Rotting, beating, concealed under layers of charm and legacy. You dragged it into the light. You didn't just threaten exposure. You performed an autopsy. In public, on the highest name in the hidden chain of command. And the worst part for them? You smiled after. Not because it was over, but because it was only the opening statement. Now they've gone full theater. Panic veiled as precision. Whispers disguised as strategy. hit contracts like it's some cinematic climax. But it's not. It's a malfunction, a glitch in their plan, not yours. This isn't a chase. This is a demonstration. Every bounty hunter they send is a case study. Every assassin is a page in your curriculum, and each one that fails becomes another confirmation that you aren't the one being hunted, you are the terrain itself. Do you feel it? The tension in the air? That's not fear. That's instinct waking up. That's the world remembering that before control came chaos. And you are that chaos, calibrated. You didn't walk into the lion's den. You walked into the illusion and started naming the actors. And now the lions are debating if they should growl or beg. And here's what terrifies them most. They don't know what you want, because people like them. They only understand enemies with a price, rebels with demands. But you're too still, too surgical. You want nothing from them, not leverage, not deals. You don't want to dethrone them. You want the audience to see them naked. You want the crowd to recognize that the king is just a man with trembling hands and backup plans. And once they see that, game over. Power doesn't die from bullets. Power dies from clarity. You are that clarity, not an explosion, but an unraveling, slow, specific, unstoppable. They thought they could suffocate you with threats. Instead, you became oxygen to everyone else suffocating in silence. You are a breathing permission slip for resistance. And that's why they want you gone. They tried to own the narrative. You hijacked it. They tried to isolate you. You multiplied. They tried to predict your next move. But they forgot. You are not moving on their board. You're the fire underneath it. So let them escalate. Let them act brave. They've never understood. This isn't about whether you'll make it out. This is about what you're turning into as they keep trying. Every hit they send, every lie they publish, every name they drag through the dirt. It's all part of the transformation. They wanted to erase you, but they're accidentally engraving you into history. And now, we reach the point they always dread. The moment the crowd starts to ask questions, the moment the hit becomes a headline, the moment silence turns into suspicion. Because when someone this dangerous gets exposed, and the response is a bounty, not a denial, the audience begins to wonder what truth was worth $1 million silencing. And from that moment on, the narrative isn't theirs anymore. It's yours. And the next chapter begins right now, as your name moves from fear to phenomenon. They always knew the day would come, the day when someone wouldn't just defy the chain of command, but detonate it from the inside. And now, that day has a name. Yours, not whispered, not debated, declared. They tried to bury you in labels: traitor, fraud, hazard, glitch. But you didn't just survive the noise. You taught it how to scream your legacy. Because phenomenon isn't born from applause. It's born from fracture, from refusal, from the look in your eyes when the world said, kneel. And you rewrote the law of gravity. They thought the bounty would shrink you. That money would turn bloodhounds into martyrs. That somewhere out there, someone would take the shot and return your name in a plastic bag. But what they failed to understand, what they could never prepare for, is that you've already died in ways they'll never comprehend. You've tasted betrayal brewed slow, inhaled silence in locked rooms, and walked out of burning chapters with the ink still on your hands. So what makes them think a bullet will finish a story that was never written in flesh? This isn't revenge. This is response. Tactical, intimate, inevitable. Because once you expose the real puppeteer, the one whose fingers reach into courts, parliaments, tech empires, and underground circuits. There's no returning to safety. There's only escalation. And here's the twist. You're not bracing for it. You're orchestrating it. You're not dodging danger. You're feeding it. Because when the fire knows your fingerprints, it starts burning in your direction. And now, the man you exposed, the one they once called untouchable, is disintegrating beneath the microscope you gifted the world. He's losing his grip, not because of evidence, but because of doubt. Doubt is louder than proof. It spreads faster. It metastasizes. And you didn't just plant it. You weaponized it. You cracked his legend in front of an audience hypnotized for decades. You gave the people the one thing they didn't know they were starving for. Unfiltered perception. His empire was never built on strength. It was built on rhythm, repetition, ritual. Headlines that danced in circles. Influencers reading from the same script. Corporations moving in choreographed chaos. You broke the rhythm. You introduced noise. You became the unscannable variable. And now, his networks. Those quiet, expensive little channels of manipulation are panicking behind the scenes. They're not trying to destroy you anymore. They're trying to outpace your influence before it turns irreversible. Too late. Because here's the truth. You didn't go viral. You went cellular. Your story didn't trend. It contaminated belief. People didn't just listen to you. They started questioning everything else. You weren't the headline. You were the filter that exposed the lies behind every other headline. And once a mind passes through your filter, it can never return to programmed obedience. And what of the assassins, the million-dollar motivators? They're restless, agitated, conflicted, because the deeper they study you, the more the contract mutates. This isn't a bounty. It's a trap disguised as currency, because those who pursue you either convert or disappear. Not because you stop them, but because once they enter your perimeter, their instincts start short-circuiting. Their purpose begins to erode. What began as a kill order becomes a question mark bleeding in their chest. Why does this target feel more like prophecy than prey? You turn the hunters into mirrors, and now the only thing they see in you is something they wish they had the courage to become. And him, the one you exposed, he knows this. That's why the silence is louder now. That's why the headlines have gotten vague. That's why old footage is resurfacing. That's why they're trying to rewrite your timeline, backdate your rebellion, confuse the sequence of your uprising. But it won't work, because your story doesn't move in straight lines. It spirals, it loops, it infects. You didn't arrive like a protest. You arrived like a diagnosis. He spent years curating the illusion of stability, the calm face, the logical voice, the handshakes with devils in tailored suits. But now the seams are ripping, not with gunfire, but with questions. Every move he makes now feels rehearsed. Every denial echoes hollow. He's unraveling in the theater of his own confidence, and the world is watching, unblinking. Your very existence has become a countdown, not to your demise, to his. Every moment you're alive, his lie loses oxygen. Every step you take turns his fortress into a stage for exposure. His power was never real. It was borrowed. And you've just reminded the world where it was stolen from. And once people remember who gave the throne away, they'll stop fearing who's on it. You're not the enemy. You're the mirror. And mirrors are fatal to those built on deception. Look around. See the shifts. You're not just moving through space. You're restructuring allegiance. Even his own enforcers are beginning to hesitate. Not from morality, but from logic. Because aligning with you might no longer be treason. It might be survival. They don't say it out loud, but you can smell it in the room, the recalibration, the nervous smiles, the soft betrayals. You are the new calculation, and no one wants to be on the wrong side of inevitability. And let's not pretend you didn't plan this. This isn't improvisation. This is execution, precision. You knew that once the truth was cracked, it wouldn't matter how many assassins they sent. You knew they'd overreact. You counted on it. You used their arrogance as fuel. You made them predictable. You turned their power into choreography. They follow scripts. You write anomalies. They control attention. You hijack cognition. This isn't rebellion. This is a reprogramming event. And what happens next? The collapse doesn't come with fireworks. It comes with quiet exodus. It comes with once loyal agents suddenly forgetting to show up, with trusted advisors giving conflicting reports, with security systems glitching at the worst possible time, with bodyguards who don't make eye contact. It begins when power realizes it's no longer feared, but pitied. And when that realization hits, the man you exposed will finally see the truth. He wasn't undone by a movement. He was unraveled by a mind. Your mind, not loud, not violent, just unshakable. And that's the kind of force no bullet can bury, because bullets kill bodies, not contagions. And you now? You're not even a person to them anymore. You're a mythological breach. You're the thing they tell each other not to become. You're the story whispered in panic rooms, the line in the code they can't debug, the presence that flickers in their analytics at 3 a.m. that they can't trace or erase. And soon, the hit won't matter. Not because they'll cancel it, but because the contract will invert. Because those who were paid to kill you will realize the real money isn't in your death. It's in your protection. Your story is becoming currency. Every assassin who fails only adds to the legend. And legends? They're harder to kill than gods. The tipping point is near. The silence is stretching thin. You can feel it in the pulse of every building you pass. They've lost the luxury of comfort. The curtains are catching fire. And soon, he'll no longer be feared. He'll be forgotten. Because what you exposed wasn't just a villain. It was the blueprint for manipulation, and you tore it apart in real time. So the final act is coming. You can feel it in the distortion. The fabric is twisting. The truth has gone too far to contain. And the phenomenon you've become, it's not just spreading, it's organizing. It's becoming conscious. You aren't just living in their system. You're rewriting its laws from the inside. And now they have to decide. Double the bounty and accelerate their collapse, or drop the hunt and watch their empire dissolve anyway. Because this isn't chess anymore. This is contagion warfare, and the vector is your name. And now that it's spreading, now that your name isn't whispered in secrecy, but spoken like prophecy, the air itself has changed. It's heavier, not because of fear, but because of possibility. The architecture of silence they once ruled with, cracking. Because you didn't just wake up the people. They started listening to each other again. The spell has broken. They no longer kneel because they're told to. They stand because you stood first. And now the final ripple begins, quiet, but undeniable. A wave born not from outrage, but recognition. People aren't angry, they're awake, and that terrifies them more than any rebellion, because anger is wild, unpredictable. But awakening, that's systematic. Awakening spreads like a pattern. It rewires instinct. It doesn't just challenge power, it outdates it. You're not a protest. You're a clock that just reminded the world it was living on borrowed time. And the man at the center of this empire, the one who pulled strings in the dark, whose empire was built on compliance and illusion. He's facing something he was never built to handle: irrelevance. You turned his power into history, while you became a living forecast. Now the systems he created are glitching, not with noise, but with pause. Executives hesitate, analysts freeze, enforcers report confusion, because when the illusion is pierced, no amount of shouting can reprogram the silence. You changed the rules without rewriting them. You became the new constant in a world built on obedience. He underestimated the velocity of truth. He thought exposure was the threat. He thought a revelation could be suppressed. But what he never understood is that truth, once activated, doesn't stay linear. It multiplies, and now it's everywhere. Look closely. His own allies are blinking. The same ones who once stood firm now speak in broken sentences. Behind closed doors, the boardrooms are war zones, not of bullets, of distrust. Every glance is a calculation. Every smile is staged. The empire wasn't built for pressure. It was built for appearances. And when appearances fail, collapse becomes choreography. His files are leaking. His foundations are crumbling. His clean hands are now stained in high-resolution scandal. And it's not because you hacked the system. It's because you reminded the system it was human, fallible, mortal. And for a structure that pretended to be divine, that reminder is fatal. You didn't attack his empire. You infected its operating principle. And now, the bounty that was placed on your head, it's become a symbol, not of fear, but of fearlessness. Every hitman that turned away, every insider that went silent, every soldier who lowered their weapon, that's the new currency. And guess what? It buys loyalty better than any bribe. Because this isn't about bullets anymore. This is about narrative. And your story? It's become a mirror people are forcing themselves to look into. Not because they're brave, but because they're tired of lying to themselves. You gave them a choice they didn't know they had. Not to fight, but to remember. To remember what it feels like to matter. And when enough people remember, no dictator, no billionaire, no manufactured saint can plug the holes in the dam. They tried propaganda. They tried distraction. They tried blackmail. And each one bounced off you like rain on obsidian, because you didn't resist their tactics. You nullified them. You didn't fight back. You absorbed. You transmuted. And now, the game is being played in a language they don't speak. You're not just a vector of contagion. You've become a pattern disruption, a redesign of emotional infrastructure, a rupture in predictive psychology. They can't track you, not because you're hidden, but because their tools were never built to process truth without a leash. And now, the one who ordered your execution, the mastermind, the untouchable, he sits in a fortress that feels more like a museum, surrounded by people who flinch when his name is mentioned, advised by professionals who no longer believe the lie they protect, watched by a world that's not looking to idolize, but to dissect. His wealth doesn't protect him anymore. His reputation doesn't shield him. His walls don't hold the way they used to. Because power, once disconnected from fear, is just costume jewelry. You changed the value of the threat. You reframed what it means to be dangerous. They called you rogue. They called you a breach. But what you really are is a lens, a way of seeing the world that's clearer than the high-definition broadcasts they pumped into homes. You didn't arrive to destroy. You arrived to reveal. And now, people are looking through your lens. They're rewinding past headlines, reanalyzing speeches, questioning loyalties, and worst of all, For them, they're talking to each other without permission. And when communication becomes independent, control becomes impossible. That's the plague you've birthed. Not violence, not fire, self-direction. The last thing they ever wanted the population to rediscover. Not rage, not hope, but clarity. The kind that makes a person stand up, walk into work and say, "I'm done lying." The kind that makes a loyalist turn informant. The kind that makes whistleblowers stop whispering. The kind that makes a citizen become a node in a network that operates on one rule. Remember the vector. Your name isn't being hunted anymore. It's being studied by governments, by rebel groups, by philosophers, by artists, by coders, by kids too young to know what power is, but old enough to feel the shift when it happens. You've become a frequency, and some will misuse it, others will misunderstand it, but none of them will unsee it. And the man you exposed, he knows this. Every breath he takes now tastes like countdown. Because you weren't supposed to last this long. You were supposed to crack under pressure, disappear in scandal, fold into exile. But you didn't just survive, you took root. Like a signal broadcast through a buried cable echoing beneath their feet. Growing, untraceable, alive. And this is where the illusion of control dies. Not with a bang, not with a vote, not with a headline, but with a shrug. That moment when the public stops fearing the name. When the whisper becomes a smirk. When obedience slips, not in revolution, but in disinterest. That's when the tyrant's breath shortens. Because people don't need to riot when they've moved on. And you gave them something to move toward. Not a flag, not a slogan, a pattern. One that doesn't require leaders, just willingness. And now the walls are thinning. You don't need to storm the gate. You are the erosion, the undermining, the inevitability they can't fast forward past. They put a bounty on your name. And in doing so, they stamped it into history. You are no longer the hunted. You are the reference point. And from here on out, every system that tries to manipulate thought will be measured against you. Every tyrant's name will be checked for the symptoms you exposed. Every narrative will be held up to your light. Every claim of truth will have to survive your echo. And when future generations ask where the shift began, not in books, not in speeches, not in treaties, but in the moment $1 million bounty couldn't silence a single voice. Yours? You didn't just reveal the most dangerous person alive. You replaced him. Because when the fear collapses and the lies no longer cast shadows, the world doesn't seek safety. It seeks the one who made clarity feel dangerous again. It seeks the vector, and that vector is still breathing.